listening to Celtic State of Mind. My name is Laura Bradburn and I am joined as always on this Friday by Tony Haggerty. How you doing, Tony?
I'm very well, Laura. Yourself?
Not too bad at all. Been a big week since the last time we were on. Couple of signings, half decent result in Europe, not a brilliant result, but I'll take it given what I thought was going to happen when we went into it, but we'll go into all that later. Joined again this week by the wonderful Colin Watt. How you doing, Colin?
I'm doing good. I almost had a wee gym Wi-Fi issue just before we came on air, so I feel like I'm growing into this role pretty well.
I was going to say, you've got to fit in somehow. Jim, unfortunately, not joining us again this week. Other pressing matters have come to the fore, I should say, so he will hopefully be back with us next week, but as soon as he is available we'll get him back on. Thanks everybody for joining us on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. Love all your comments. We'll obviously get to reading them in due course, but before we do all that, as is customary on a Friday, we'll go to our Guess the Celt. And I have to say, I got a very excited text message from Colin Watt when he was coming back on, because he was very, very excited about this Guess the Celt. For anybody who hasn't seen it, it was of course Gary Hooper. For my money, the best goal scorer we had in the post, or the first great goal scorer we had in the post Henrik Larsson era, but we'll go into that a little bit later on. Colin, I'll come to you first. Why were you texting me like an 8-year-old boy going, Gary Hooper, can't believe it? What's the big deal about Gary Hooper?
He was alright, wasn't he? He was no Stefan Skepovic. No, you said it just there, Laura. He is probably one of the most natural finishers of a ball that we've seen at the club since Henrik Larsson was here. And unfortunately for him, his career just kind of went in a downward trajectory after he left Celtic. But if he was to have stayed at the club, if you'd have got 7, 8, maybe even more seasons out of him, he was someone that could have went on to break the records at the club. It was so natural, and he's been the striker that everybody's been missing since he left. The amount of times that players would get down the right hand side, and I'm thinking of Frimpong when he broke through into the team, get to the byline, cut it back, and there was nobody there, and you just knew a striker like Gary Hooper would have been there to put it in the back of the net. And you know what, sometimes there's just a club that a player is fit for, and Gary Hooper was a perfect fit for Celtic. Probably one of the best signings that was made in that period, especially when you look at it. Guys like Joe Ledley coming in, Victor Wanyama, we had a really good scouting system back then, and to pick someone up for $2.5 million who was the top goal scorer in the Championship the season before he came up, how much would you be paying for someone like that nowadays? It was a bargain buy for Celtic, and he didn't do well when he left the club, but when there was kind of rumours of him coming back, I would have been really excited to see what he could have done, especially even as a backup to someone like Dembele or Edward.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you raised there about what you would have been excited to see him come back. As you'll see from the headline we've got there, the Fraser Forster rumours are coming back again. We'll go into that a bit later in the whole ethos of whether Celtic players are for coming back to the club. But before we do that, Tony, I'll come to you and Gary Hooper. I said before that for me, he's the best, or he was the first real goal scorer we had in the post-Henrik Larsson era. For years between Larsson's departure in 2004 and Gary Hooper arriving in 2010, we were looking for that person who would be at the end of the moves that Colin's talking about, there to do the main job of putting the ball in the net. He had that, didn't he? I
had it in abundance. I think Gary Hooper was a classic example of a man leaving the club and finding out that the grass wasn't exactly greener. Elsewhere. I don't blame players for chasing a big payday, but as a lot of people say, when you leave Celtic, your career trajectory is down the way. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. But for Gary Hooper it was, and he could never recapture that form or grab the glory of the limelight, as Colin said, once he left the club. But what a phenomenal goal scorer. And another player that came in and got it from the get-go. I think of Gary Hooper, I think of that sliding goal from the Izagiri cross against Rangers. I think the goal before that, where he took one touch and he was lightning, and before he knew it, he was in on McGregor sliding under him. I think of the goal in Moscow that helped Celtic to their first ever away Champions League run, low stick cross, lethal finish, and the one that he also took to the side and streamed into the top corner against Rangers as well. And his cracker at Ibrox, although they lost that game where he bent, I've never seen a ball bend as much as that, with the exception of Roberto Carlos's free kick in the Tour Noir. How Gary Hooper managed to squeeze that in past McGregor, which is no mean feat at Ibrox that day. And the ball, somebody seemed to be controlling the ball from the stand. That day, the way he bent it, I mean, it was a sublime finish. Sadly, they lost, but still a cracking goal. And the hallmark of a striker who just knew where the goal was. You know, he hit one in against Moscow as well. The qualifier was Celtic 1-2-1. You know, screamed it straight through the keeper's legs, but you know, you put the ball in front of him. What a nose and an eye for goal he had. And as you say, probably the talismanic figure that the Celtic fans had been craving since Larsson. And I think that's why they latched onto him so much, and it's why they were so disappointed to see him go, because he went to a club that was it Norwich he went to, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He left to go to Norwich, and you say to yourself, I understand why you're going, but stay. You know, you were playing you were playing Champions League football, regular European football. You know, you could have probably stayed, as Colin said, for longer and maybe got a better move and then still enjoyed it, because he would have been scoring goals and he would have been in a place that he was loved, and he was adored. You know, but a lot of Celtic fans say, he was a mercenary, was this or that. That's fair enough. You can't blame players for chasing money. But Celtic made Gary Hooper. But it also made the rod for Gary Hooper's back moving going forward. And he could never quite replicate that form or be part of a team that he was that he was the attacking fulcrum of. You know, people said when Gary Hooper left Celtic he would play for England. Premiership strikers needed more than that. You know, he was a penalty box predator, but he wasn't a guy who could run the channels and, you know, flick the ball on and maybe beat 2 and 3 players and stick it in the top corner. That's maybe why the things that were maybe lacking in his game, but put the ball in front of him in front of goal, he wouldn't miss.
I tell you what, see the partnership, between Hooper and Stokes was outstanding. They were two players that just knew where each other was going to be. I'm thinking to the game at Easter Road when we had the Bumblebee kit on, we won 3-1 that day. I think Stokes and Hooper both scored, and they were just outstanding. It was almost telepathic. But I'd say that my favourite Gary Hooper story is going into the last day of the season against Hearts, when he knew he was like 2 or 3 goals behind in the top goal scorer charts, and we beat Hearts 5-0 that day, and Gary Hooper gets all 5. That's the kind of striker that he had, and every single goal was outstanding.
Yeah, he was just a fantastic scorer, and something that I think we missed in the post-Larsson era, something that I think we certainly missed last season. You know, Lee Griffiths, you could probably have argued at one point in time was that, hasn't been for a long time, and certainly was something we were missing, that cutting-edge finish that we needed. And I think, Tony, I was behind the goal, that Rangers goal that you're talking about, that he bent it in, and it was one of those ones that the minute it left his foot, you just knew it was sailing into the back of the net, and you were celebrating before it was even in the goal. Just utterly euphoric feeling. Yeah.
You just wondered how he did it, though.
Oh, yeah.
He was just like, he had little room for error. I mean, it was perfection personified of a striker. You know, one touch, look up, past a goalkeeper of McGregor's calibre. You know, it was quite an exquisite finish, to be honest.
Yeah, and I was going to say that. So many years we've watched Rangers have great goalkeepers like McGregor, like Kloss, like Gorham, who, you know, would save shots like that in their sleep, and were so often a point of frustration. We talked about George Cadet last week. That team lost a lot of Old Firm matches because of the goalkeeper they were playing against rather than because of their own play. And for him to put a finish like that away against a goalkeeper, as you say, of McGregor's calibre, who's probably arguably a better goalkeeper today than he was then even, but still a brilliant goalkeeper, was just a sign of his absolute class. But, you know, as you say, his career didn't go to the heights that we would have hoped it would for him, in a case of the grass isn't always greener. On that point, let's move on to the topic below. Fraser Forster transfer speculation re-emerges. Now, for anybody who follows me on Twitter, I think I've made my feelings clear on the matter, but I'll say it again now. For me, Fraser Forster coming back, he's the greatest goalkeeper I've ever seen in a Celtic shirt. Hands down. I was born 1989, so I remember the dying embers of Packy Bonner's days, who in his day was a great goalkeeper, but I don't think even on the level of Fraser Forster, he would, at his height, he was not only the best goalkeeper I've seen play for Celtic, he was probably one of the best goalkeepers in Europe. Having said that, I'm not for him coming back. He had ample opportunity to come back last season. He's been away twice and come back twice. I don't want to be sloppy seconds for a guy like that. Now, Colin, I'll come to you. Am I wrong on that situation? You said you would have loved to have brought Hooper back, but what about Forster?
I mean, if Forster does sign again, I think there will be a record for the amount of times he's signed for a club. This will be the 5th time he's signed for us if he does come back. Look, he's meant to be on 130 grand a week, so maybe the idea of that kind of is put to bed, that he would need to take a massive pay reduction to come here. Would I take him, regardless of the fact that he has been here 4 times before? Yes, I would. And I'll tell you for why, right? It's not just about what he's done in the past, it's about the type of goalkeeper that he is. And whether it's Fraser Forster or whether it's someone else who's in that calibre of goalkeeper, it's exactly what we need right now. I'm looking at Rangers and I'm seeing a guy in goal who is getting them 12 to 15 points a season with the saves that he's pulling off. We've got a goalkeeper at the minute that we don't even know can come out for a cross. And I've been a fan of Barkas, and I think there is a good goalkeeper in there, but I can't rely on him to pick up 12 to 15 points a season for us. And that's what you need. You need a solid goalkeeper at the back. And I understand the discussion on he needs to be good with the ball at his feet. He needs to play the ball out. Look, that comes later. Keep the ball out the back of the net. We conceded far too many goals stupidly last season. All you need is someone that you can rely upon, that if a shot's coming even straight at him, it will be saved. Sometimes last season there was shots straight at the goalkeeper that went in the back of the net. So get him. He keeps the ball at the net first. Work on the rest of the stuff in training. I'd rather have a reliable number 1 than switching between the 3 that we've got right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with, the calibre of goalkeeper there. John Sweeney on YouTube, thanks for commenting, says Foster or Barkas, it's a no-brainer, and having him we could win the league. Somebody else has said McGregor is making the huge difference for Rangers. So, goalkeeper in this day and age is a vital position. Tony, am I letting my heart rule my head by saying I wouldn't have him back, do you think?
Laura, you're perfectly entitled to your opinion. I'll give you a definition. Goalkeeper, a player charged with the task of stopping the ball entering the net. It's a no-brainer for me as well. Fraser Forster is the best goalkeeper that a lot of Celtic supporters have seen in that jersey. I'm with Colin. We start with the basics first. I'm not a fan of the sweeper keeper, but I know Ange likes to play that, but Big Forster could learn to do that. First and foremost, you keep the ball out the net. Celtic's Achilles heel last season was not keeping the ball out the net. Fraser Forster defied belief with some of his performances at Celtic, and if he's available and they can get him, the wages Colin alluded to there, fine, but then you have to. The Celtic are in desperate need of a goalkeeper that can keep the ball out the net, and also as well, they're in desperate need of a goalkeeper who's commanding, who has presence and instills confidence in your back four. Fraser Forster did all of that and the above. You only need to look at that League Cup final performance against Rangers. Utterly superhuman. He psyched a team out of that, because Celtic were second best on that day, although they created the best chances game, scored one, Michael Johnson was the other, but Fraser Forster psyched the whole team out of that cup final. Leave the Rangers team believing that he was unbeatable. Name me a performance like that you've seen from a Celtic goalkeeper ever.
The only one you can ever think about that's on par with that is maybe Davy Marshall in the Nou Camp.
Right. That probably, yeah. But see when you've got the ability to do that as Foster has, then I think, bringing him back, I don't really care how many times he's been brought back, and he should have came back last year, and I think a lot of Celtic fans felt badly let down by that, and it's maybe a year too late, but he's still a great goalkeeper, and as I say, he instills confidence, and that's a specialist position. And the specialism is you keep the ball out the net, and that man can do that in abundance. So I wouldn't be averse to it. But you're entitled to your opinion as well. If you don't see it fitting in and working, and I know a lot of people don't think he could adapt to this sweeper keeper role. But I just want a keeper that keeps the ball out the net for a start, and we'll work on the rest later. That's something you can build on, and I'm sure Ange could talk him round to adding that to his game. But as a presence, he would be huge in goal, not just for the actual art of goalkeeping, but the defenders as well, because he just instills confidence, and he's just a big man, isn't he? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Terrifying cross-get at times.
I don't think you need to look further than the Euro 2020 winners in Italy to see Donnarumma, who, for my money, I used to write a bit about Italian football just when he was coming up at AC Milan. So you're talking, I mean, he's only 22 or something now, but you're talking about 4 or 5 years ago. He was only 17 when he was in the Milan first team, and then I think 18 when he made his debut for Italy. His distribution up until this day and his footwork is not great, but he's probably the best shot stopper in the game at the moment, and that's enough to make you a good goalkeeper. So I take on board both your points. Listen, I reserve the right to be as much of a hypocrite as anybody else. I said sentiment's got to go out the window with Neil Lennon. You've got to look at the results. I said sentiment's got to go out the window with Paddy Roberts. You've got to look at the statistics. And now that Fraser Forster wants to come back, it's all sentiment saying I don't want him back. So listen, I know how much of a hypocrite I sound, but
you're consistent, Laura.
I am consistently inconsistent, if nothing else. Yeah, exactly.
See the,
sorry,
Laura,
Colin, on you go.
See, the thing that I think we can all agree on is there does need to be a goalkeeper to come in, I think, this summer. I don't think you can rely on the 3 that you've got at the minute to get us through, especially to sort of challenge for the title. If we're going to compete in Europe, if we get through the rounds, I still do think that you're looking for another keeper to come in, whether it's Fraser Forster, whether it's someone else. I know we're linked with Matt Ryan before he made the move to Sociedad, so I think there's definitely the outlook there that we will bring in a goalkeeper between now and the transfer window closing. Sorry.
But the bottom line is all 3 goalkeepers that we've had have had the chance to claim that as the undisputed number 1, and none of them have. None of them have covered themselves in glory at any stage or proved that they're reliable on the big stage. No, and they've all had the big stage, but you would not be comfortable going into battle again with one of them as your undisputed number 1. So that says it all. And they've all had a try at it, and you can only be fair to them for so long. Celtic are in dire need of a goalkeeper. Whether that's Foster or somebody else, as you say, Colin, so be it. But they have to get somebody who, first and foremost, can keep clean sheets and the ball out the net. Neither of the 3 of the guys that are there can do it on a consistent basis. That's the bottom line. That's why we're having this discussion. Yeah,
and I think that's fair. We'll go on to talk about the game against Midtjylland on Tuesday a little bit later, and the obvious, what some consider an obvious error from Barkas, others consider it a bit more technical than that, but we'll discuss that in more detail. A couple of comments coming in from David McMillan on YouTube. I wouldn't want him back. Great keeper, but he let us down last season. Enough is enough. And Ryan Kelly agreeing with that. But plenty coming down on your side, guys, as well, saying that regardless of what's happened previously, he's an excellent goalkeeper, and that's all that should matter, I should say. But before we go on to talk about the game against Midtjylland on Tuesday, just looking at your comments about Gary Hooper, Colin, and this Fraser Forster conversation that we had, the kind of stick that I was getting on Twitter a few weeks ago with the whole Paddy Roberts thing. There seems to be a hankering among Celtic supporters in general to sometimes want players back to capture former glories. It's extending even into new generations of players, with some folk wanting Jordan Larsson to come to the club. I don't see that ending well in any case, because as good a player as he is, I don't think he could live up to his dad's reputation among Celtic supporters. Where do you stand on the general issue of bringing players back to the club? Do you agree with it in general, or does it go on a case by case basis, or is it generally a no?
I'd probably say it's a case-by-case basis. There's some players that have went to the club and came back that it just didn't work for them. Definitely Paddy Roberts' second spell, although he was hampered with a lot of injuries, it just didn't live up to the hype of the first time round. And saying that, I still think he's a fantastic footballer, and I think he's just never been able to capture the form that he showed the first time round here. Sean Maloney is probably one that I look at as someone who was almost as successful the second time round when he came back. I thought he actually played pretty well. Apart from that, there's some players where it's just like, as you're saying about Jordan Larsson, I think the boy's a fantastic striker. I don't know if any of you saw his goal that he scored for Spartak the other night, where he dinked it over the goalkeeper. That was basically just watching his dad from about 25 years ago. But there's certain things where you just say, look, the nostalgia aspect to it, that's what's drawing a lot of the attention. He'll be a fantastic striker, but you just know that if he only scores 10, 15 goals a season, you go, well, your dad scored 53, where are you? I mean, it's not worth taking the risk. It's another thing where it's the same when Henrik Larsson gets linked with a managerial job all the time. Don't let him come here. Look what happened to Ali McCoist at Rangers. Don't let him come here. Just continue to live off the nostalgia aspect. And Amazon or Netflix, if you're watching, I want a 7-part series on Henrik Larsson, very similar to the Michael Jordan thing. That's surely a great watch.
That would be excellent. But before you mention Ali McCoist, closer to home, don't bring him back and have him do a Neil Lennon. That's what I would.
Oh, well, I thought we weren't going to mention that, Laura. Come on. We're trying to move on.
And also, don't age us too much. 25 years ago, his dad was doing that. Try 15.
What we in 2021, you go back, I'm thinking as far back as, the 94 World Cup when he was doing it for Sweden.
Well, fair enough. That was his pre-Celtic days, but what he did of his iconic dreadlocks at the time. Tony, what are your thoughts on the subject? Are you more of a it's been and done, move on, or do you think there's cases where a player can come back?
Listen, it's the romantics in the Celtic supporters. When they cling on to a hero and he leaves and then there's a chance that they come back, that they can recapture former glories, that's all they think about. No, they don't think about in the here and now. They think about what they did before. And that it's hard to recapture that and recreate that because you don't have the same team. Time has moved on, the game's moved on, that kind of thing. But it doesn't stop the hopeless romantic and the Celtic supporters, who the whole club's built on nostalgia, isn't it? And icons and heroes from the past. And it's what we do best. Some players more than others. Some take on a doe-eyed mystical reverence, don't they? And they all of a sudden become better than they were in your eyes, and you go all dewy-eyed thinking about it. But there's that old adage, never go back. Don't work for Fraser Forster, to be fair, so thankfully. But I'm always, if you're talking about bringing people back, I'm always about what they can contribute. Not just the nostalgia factor and the emotional factor and the romantic factor. They have to be able to contribute, first and foremost. And a lot of those cases in the past have been brought back for the emotional pull. Charlie Nick came back, Frank McAvenny came back, guys like that, and it never worked. But you and I, realistically, well, if you're old enough to remember those times, realistically, you would have known it was a clutching at straws. That they weren't going to perform the way they did because they never had the players around them. So it depends what time as well. The Jordan Larsson one's just built out of pure nostalgia, and of course there'll be traits in his dad because it's genetics, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but he'll always have that comparison. The same as Kenny Dalglish's son had the comparison, George Best's son had comparison, You are never going to live up to those idols as footballers. You can only try and make your own path, And Paul Dalglish found it really hard to shake off the King Kenny because not only did he look like King Kenny, a couple of times when he swivelled and did the pivot, he was just amazing of his dad as a footballer and did things similar, but he was never going to be of that, golden ilk because King Kenny was something special. That's hard for sons of famous footballers to try and be, and then they get labelled. So the Larsson thing is monitor him, again, a person of interest, and if he can do that on a persistent basis, then he might be worth saying, okay, a punt. But in general, footballers, I'm always of the kind of, what can they bring to the table? If you can really prove that you're going to add value, they can come back. But be wary of that, because they're never going to recreate the so-called glory days. Patrick Roberts had a brilliant purple patch the first time at Celtic and lived off that, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how good or bad Patrick Roberts as a player has been since. You're always comparing it to that first phase at Celtic, aren't you?
Yeah.
And if you brought him back, you wouldn't know what, and as Colin said there, he's been injury prone as well. But his career's been stop-start ever since he left Celtic. It kind of tells you something, doesn't it?
Yeah. I
Sorry,
think
Laura.
And you go, Colin, sorry.
I was going to say, just on that idea of the nostalgia aspect to it, one player that when he left, everyone's like, he'll come back one day, is Kieran Tierney.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, if Kieran Tierney comes back at, say, 32, 33, what's that going to be like? Is it going to be on a nostalgia thing? Are we going to see the next big youngster coming through that we're saying, well, you don't need a Kieran Tierney as good as he's going to go on to be? We're just bringing him back for the namesake, or is it just the attachment to the club? Do you know what I mean?
You try telling all the Celtic supporters that Kieran Tierney's coming back at 32 and you say you don't want him. There would be an
Exactly.
all night that Kieran Tierney is destined to come back to Celtic at some point. Right? It's his destiny, because he also wants to. But again, I would want Kieran Tierney for at least 2 or 3 years of good service, not for the waving and the Gary Gillespie 1 in 9 out type thing. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want that. But if he made his ambition to come back and declared he wanted to come back, the Celtic supporters would be in a frenzy for that, regardless of what age he was. You say 32 or whatever, So I've no doubt in my mind Kieran Tierney will come back. But I'd like to think he would come back and give Celtic some decent years' service, as opposed to a final swan song where he doesn't play as much or fit in the first team.
Yeah, well, we'll wait and see if that happens. We've got a few years to go before that. Hopefully he does plenty in the meantime. But just to close out the conversation, contestant A on YouTube says, why would Larsson need to live up to his dad's name? He only needs to live up to the standard of the forwards currently at the club. I don't know if you've met any Celtic fans, but I'm sure the name Larsson on the back of the shirt would draw comparisons, even if people didn't mean to do it, or if it wasn't a deliberate thing. It would just be part of being a Celtic supporter, would be to see the name Larsson on the shirt and compare it to one of the greatest players in our history. You only need to look at, as Tony said, Paul Dalglish has suffered from it. Jordi Cruyff was another one, never lived up to his dad's name, to the point where he actually changed his name on the shirt so that he didn't have to have Cruyff on the back of his shirt. So it is a real thing that sons of great players suffer from, and I think that would be the case for Jordan Larsson. But I think it's wishful thinking anyway. I don't think we're paying 15 million for a striker anytime soon. But we'll move on to more pressing current matters. Tony, I'll come to you first on this. Midtjylland on Tuesday night. I didn't see the first half, unfortunately. I caught what was arguably the poorer of the two halves for Celtic, but the reports I heard of the first half, that was that new signing and my mate Liel Abada made a great first impression, a great debut, scored his goal, was looking great. What was your impressions of the Celtic performance?
Do you know what, right? And people will be shocked horror about this. I'm going to be really positive here about Celtic the other night, right?
Wow.
Because the negatives are there for all to see, right? We went in with the negatives, so they weren't a surprise. I.e., the goalkeeper, the right back, and Near Beaton, right? So they were negatives going into the game for a start, right? So they didn't fail to disappoint you or let you down. What I did like was the shape that we played for 44 minutes until Near Beaton took a rush of blood to the head. Right? And Liel Abada was busy. He was linking up play, linking up with Turnbull, linking up with McGregor, linking up with Edward. The real buzz bomb energy. And I wrote a piece for the Celtic Week saying what a cracking goal he scored. Because the temptation is to blast that when it comes off the goalkeeper when he's parried it. He went for accuracy. And he scurried it into the deck, making sure that the ball would go in the net, that it was heading towards an empty goal. And he did it like a veteran striker. For somebody at 19, he was switched on. Not only was he switched on to follow the ball in, he was lightning quick. The goalie's carried it, and the first person you see is the ball's heading towards the goalkeeper is Abada coming in. So, game intelligence, I love that. Right.
Do you know, but sorry to interrupt, Tony, and I'll let you go on in a second, but I couldn't agree more with that point, because you know the first thing that came into my head when I saw that goal back, do you remember the wee flick that Edward tried against Rangers last season, and everybody was begging him to put the laces through it, and he missed an open goal because of it? It was exactly that, but sorry, carry on.
Well, but right, exactly. So you think, well, it might be the only chance he gets in the game. Concentrated in burying it. And burying it, he did. Get his Celtic career off to a flyer. Magic. Fans loved him. 44 minutes hook. Sacrificial substitute for his compatriot just taking a gun and shooting himself in the foot, right, and the team. Right? No explanation. There is no explanation for what he did. Right? Let his teammates down and himself as well. Second half, so Celtic have hit the post. Chrissy's hit the post. And big up Ange. He's got a tune out of Christie. He said to him, look, you're in this team. Might be an unpopular decision amongst the supporters, but I don't care. I'm doing it my way. If you want to move, son, earn it. But do me a turn. And Ange didn't cut off his nose to spite his face. Played his strongest team. Big up to him for that, right? Christie gave him a tune, right? Dane Murray, when he came on to replace Beaton, you know, two young guys, combined age of 39. We had as a centre back pair, and they're 49. I'm 10 years older than that, right? Yeah, Michelin never thought at any time to put two young boys under pressure. Coped with it. You know, they could have crumbled, you know, but he didn't. The goalkeeper that crumbled, but again, we know all about that. I was happy with that. The midfield trio, Turnbull, Sorrell and McGregor, I'm having them all day long. Sorrell just needs to curb his enthusiasm, because he'll get 2 yellow cards of a game now and again. Just for running in and scudding people, right? Yeah. But I love his industry. McGregor and Turnbull are ballers, right? Up front, Edward. What do you do about Odsonne Edward? You know, whatever one time, that's an absolute sitter that in his heyday, he would have just, he would have dinked it Larson style, right? I think a part of the ways there should happen, and quickly. I think he wants out the door, so I think it's time we got him out the door and brought in 1/2 strikers if we can afford them and they're available, right? Haggerty, you know, jury's still out on Haggerty, and the Griffiths conundrum remains. So, but I thought there was a real method to Celtic. They were slick at times with their passing, they were sharp and speedy going forward, you know, so that's what I wanted to see, and I was pleasantly surprised. And for all my negativity in general during Andy's appointment, I have to say I'm warming to him, because he speaks his truth as well. You know, he just calls it like it is, you know, and also what I like, he refused to throw those players under the bus publicly. Privately, probably seething. He's probably got that mentality, whatever happens in here stays in this dressing room, and that's the way it should be. Don't ever slaughter your players publicly, but by all means read the Riot Act in the privacy of your own dressing room. That's fine, I'm on board with that. And Celtic, as I've constantly said on this pod, they will improve in a week's time, a month's time, 2 months' time. Starfelt's coming in, Furuhashi's coming in, you know, the rumours of others coming in. You get a goalkeeper in, you can start to see a method here, a style of play, formation, organisation, shape, and I'm quite pleased. I was really pleased what I saw the other night, because I didn't expect it. Pleasant surprise, and I think Celtic can go to Denmark and win, and win comfortably, because I didn't see enough from Michelin to think that if Celtic can pressure them again, that they'll beat Celtic.
Yeah, to back up what you've said, NTJA on YouTube says, I've never ever been so excited after a draw for Celtic than I was after the Champions League game. Ange did wonders with half a team. Hopefully we get fullbacks resolved. So I think everybody is sharing what you said there about, coming out of it feeling a lot more positivity. If you'd said to me before Tuesday night that I would come out of the game thinking we could go away to Denmark and potentially get a win, then I wouldn't have believed you, but I'm now sitting here with that attitude. Now, the fact that PSV won their first game 5-1 against Galatasaray and are looking pretty tasty, for want of a better word, is something that we don't need to consider until later down the line. But Colin, I'll come to you first. Before I get your general thoughts on the game, Tony raised a good point about Edouard, that he's not the player of old that he wants out the door. It looks to me like he's tried to do the Ayer thing, tried to do the Boyata thing, tried to do what so many players have done in the past and down tools, but in his case, he's maybe not down tools fully, but he's certainly not half the player he was, and it seems to have backfired for him a bit, because I'm not hearing anything about a move in the offing. Do you think he did himself damage last season in terms of becoming a player that people want to buy? Is he stuck here because of the decisions he made in the way that he played last season?
I don't know if you maybe just missed it, Laura, but there was news that broke just before we came on air that Brighton have apparently put a bid in of £21 million.
Well, there you go, breaking news, folks. I didn't see that, so there you go.
That was the rumour that was coming round just before we came on air. So if you get anything like that, I was talking about it in my WhatsApp group with my pals. If you get anything like that, and what you get for Ayer, to get £30 million for the two of them combined, that is a fantastic bit of business, especially with both of them still having 12 months left on their deal. But I get the point that Tony's making, because at the minute you're sitting with two strikers. You're sitting with Haggerty and you're sitting with Edouard, and at the minute none of them are inspiring in front of goal. I think Haggerty did fairly well pre-season. Edouard showed what he could do in spells. I mean, you saw the goal he scored against Sheffield Wednesday. It was a great striker's finish. But none of them are the kind of player that you're saying at the minute, well, they are on form. So when you go into the game next Wednesday, it's a sort of toss of a coin to say, well, it's either going to be Haggerty or Edouard. I think on that performance and the fact that it's probably going to be a completely different game over there on Wednesday night, I'd probably start with Haggerty. I think Haggerty's someone who is better at linking up the play, especially if you get Abada and maybe Forrest or Christie on the left-hand side. I think they'll have some good interplay. I'm thinking back to the game against, was it Lille last year? When Haggerty and Elyounoussi linked up extremely well. Yeah. So I think he'll be the one to come into that. And then if you're still needing to go, put the two of them up front. Go with Haggerty and Edouard if you need to go. But that is the problem. If Edouard does go, then all you're left with is Haggerty. So you are going to have to dip into that market and try and find someone who's going to get 20, 30 goals a season, something that Edouard's done repeatedly for Celtic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is a school of thought that Griffiths could end up playing some kind of part here, as unpalatable as that might be to some Celtic fans. I think Andy's a realist, and if that's true about the 21 million from Brighton, you have to bite the hand off for that, and a parting of the ways. And as you say, Colin, that's a fantastic piece of business. I always say if Chelsea are selling players with that kind of money, I mean, we really should be wearing striped suits and a swag bag and a mask. For Scottish Premiership, it's incredible sums, right? For the level that we're playing at, but it's fair play to Celtic because that business model's working, right? Of getting in, decent players, gems, and polishing them up and making them ready for somebody else, but at our price and on our terms. And I'm all for that. That's something that ain't broke at Celtic. That business model of getting players in cheaply and flogging them on for a fortune further down the line, and then getting that sell-on clause when they go on for more money and later on in their career. So I would be delighted if Celtic got 21 million from Brighton for Odsonne Edouard, and I think it's a timely bid. And I think, and I know a lot of people say, "I don't take the first bid because they're willing to pay more." I think in this situation, you would just say, "Yep, thanks very much, thanks for playing. We'll take that. Au revoir, Edouard, and thanks for the memories." Because that's a tidy sum, and you could get 2 strikers in if you reinvested some of that in the team, which I hope they would do moving forward.
That's just over 8 Gary Hoopers. Just putting it out there.
There you go. Can't have a team full of Gary Hoopers. I know you like them, Colin. We defend now and again, you know what I mean?
Well, Colin, to widen the conversation a bit more, we've had Tony's thoughts on the Michelin game. What were your thoughts on the team performance in general? What were your thoughts on the new signing Abada before he had to leave the pitch? And obviously, you know, where do you stand on Near Beaton and his future at the club, given that he kind of lost his head a little bit as far as things are concerned and got himself sent off and probably maybe cost us a victory in the match, to be honest?
Near Beaton probably shouldn't have came back into the team after his disaster at Ibrox, but we seem to just give people second, third chances willy-nilly at the club, so it wasn't actually a surprise to see him in. You look at it though and you're thinking, the guy's barely kicked a ball in pre-season and we've thrown him into this big game. I think Natasha tweeted about it as well, saying we've went with the experience and the experience has let us down, and that's the best way to describe it. Look, there was a lot of positives to take away from that game. As I said, Leela Bada on the right hand side, and on the left hand side he was kind of switching between the two. He was extremely impressive. There was one just before we got the goal where he was down the right hand side and he took his man on and it got given out as a goal kick, but when you watch the replay back, that ball was still in. He's someone that's going to hit the byline. He's going to get his head up and look for the player in the middle. You saw it a couple of times when he put the two balls in and Christie headed over. Look, that's what we've been missing out this team last year. When you take James Forrest out of that team, that's what you miss. And obviously Forrest still to come back in. The question will be, until Furuhashi clears his quarantine, can you play both Abada and Forrest in the same team? Because if you can get them two firing, it's putting balls on a plate for whoever's going to play up front, and that's exactly what we need. There's other things on what Tony said that I agree with. Sorrow, I think, on the ball is fantastic. He's very, very good with his distribution, getting forward, turning defence into attack. When he's not got the ball, it's wild. Some of the tackles that he went into on Tuesday, he was very, very lucky to get away with not getting booked. So that is really something he has to work on, because as poor as the referee was on Tuesday, Scottish referees are probably 10 times worse, and they're going to book him for stuff like that. I thought it was ironic, the Michelin red card, especially after the wee wink that came from the guy once he get Near Beaton sent off. He knew what he was doing. He was winding the guy up completely. So after he'd put the wee wink in, it was brilliant to see him getting sent off. But Dane Murray coming in at centre half, another good performance. Stephen Welsh had a leader's performance at centre back. He's someone who is determined to prove me wrong, because I said he would be a third or fourth choice centre back, but he is doing extremely, extremely well. And overall, it was good to see players that we thought last season, you know, they didn't really give us anything. Guys like McGregor, who I thought was outstanding in that game, and he was very unlucky not to score with the one that came off the bar. So it's early signs, but the early signs are positive. And as Anne says, his team will be even fitter in 8 days' time, and that I can't wait to see.
Yeah, it definitely looks as if he's getting a tune, as Tony said, out of players like Christie, who didn't last season, and out of, you know, a number of other players that weren't playing well last season, like we've all said. Red Scotland commented on YouTube just not that long ago that Held, Starfelt, Julienne, Murray, Welsh, you know, when you look at that as an option, yes, Murray especially, but Welsh as well are inexperienced, and we don't really know how Starfelt's going to go. But Tony, that to me isn't a poor selection of defenders. I think Welsh and Murray have shown enough that you can depend on them when they come in to do a job, as much as you can depend on any teenager of that age. If Ange lives up to his word, surely he's going to give them a chance at first team football this season.
I'll let you know after Wednesday night. He's probably going to have to go with Welsh and Murray, right?
Yeah.
Early signs are good. I like the look of Murray, and I agree with you, Colin, with Welsh. He's just looking at every passing game, right? But he's not brought Starfelt in for nothing, right? We need experience, right?
Yeah.
Near Beaton was the one that let us down the other night. But you're talking about cool heads under pressure. Julian and Starfelt coming back in, you would say are automatic picks, but are they? Because you can't drop Welsh on his current form, right? Or he's got the yellow jersey, as they say. It's his to lose at the minute. So I think Starfelt will come in with Welsh when he's fit and ready to play, or allowed to play, and then Julian coming back. But these are the kind of dilemmas and headaches that a manager loves, right? He's also got Murray there, so you Starfelt, Julian, Welsh, Murray. You say that's no bad, and Shielda as well. Yeah, well, Urigidi, I'm not.
Well, I didn't stroke that one, I think.
Talk about that later. But he would probably want another central defender to be sure. You know what I mean? Because with youngsters come mistakes and experience, all that kind of thing, right? And you know my thoughts. I would allow them to breathe. Like Laura, you say, you have to play them. Iron any kind of deficiencies in the game out of them, and give them that confidence and say to them, I'm trusting you, don't let me down, or go and show people what you can do, right? And if the manager tells you that, then if Celtic play with Welsh and Murray on Wednesday night, you might be like, oh goodness, but Patty's like, go and show those guys, go and take this game by the scruff of it, go and perform to the best of your ability and show why the manager rates you so highly and he's trusted you with a mission of such importance. And I would be intrigued, like a lot of Celtic supporters, to see what they can do. But I'm also buoyed by the fact you have Julian coming back, you brought in Starfelt. You can see bit by bit and just piecing the team together. Colin mentioned Forrest. I wouldn't be surprised in the future, Colin, if Forrest and Abada both played in Celtic. You could see the pace and the level they played at the other night. At times, the way they knocked that about and the way they broke forward at breakneck speed, you need wingers for that.
Yeah.
And he likes two wide men, doesn't he?
Yep.
So you're playing two wide men with AN other in the centre, whoever that may be. And I think it would be a centre forward coming in to replace the possibly departing Edward. And if you can get two wide guys, I think that could be Andy's MO moving forward. And you're carrying a potent threat there, because you've also got Abada who can cut inside and score. Boris can do the same. So it's like a three-pronged attack, really, isn't it? So you're maybe going a 4-3-3 type thing, right, for want of a better expression. But you're certainly getting value out of two wide men supplying a main striker. I think that the way I looked at it the other night, I thought that's the kind of thing he's kind of building towards. He just needs the personnel, but he's getting the building blocks in place. First of all, he's dealing with the back, bringing in Starfelt. Probably the midfield I would maybe add a midfield enforcer, maybe somebody with a bit of height and presence and a bit of dig, to not replace Scott Brown, but kind of similar type role. And Sorrell's good, but I think Colin and I have alluded to, his challenging can be erratic, can't it? And that worries me slightly. But I think that's kind of what Andy's maybe thinking. Could be wrong, but I was quite impressed by a lot of Celtic stuff on Tuesday night.
Well, here's the thing, Tony. See if you are going to have to play, and it does look as if it's going to be the case, Welsh and Murray. I do think that you're going to have to change the setup to protect them over there as well. You don't want them having to face 90 minutes of attack, because you know what it's like when Celtic go away from home in Europe. You can have the game abroad and the team will come at you for 90 minutes and then they get to Celtic Park and they change the way they play. And I fully expect that will be the case from Midtjylland through the week. So if that is going to be the case, you've obviously got Sorrell sitting there. But I think I would probably drop David Turnbull out and bring someone in. Maybe, and Cham, if he was fit, would have been an option, but he's not. He's just not. So I'm looking at probably one of the only other players that can play in there is Liam Shaw, who I thought has been pretty decent in pre-season. So I would maybe go with a three of maybe McGregor, Sorrell and Shaw. And I know it's very defensive, but I think you have got to put that protection in front of those back two, especially the way that we seem to play the wingers as inverted wingers now as well. So that there's going to be times where they're going to get at us, and we do have to protect them.
I couldn't agree more. If you play those two youngsters, you're going to have to protect them, and the manager will know that. So that's his call on Wednesday night. But my point is, from what I've seen of the two of them, I wouldn't be averse to playing the two of them. Normally, I would balk at that. But from what I've seen so far, I think the two young guys could cope with it. But I know Midtjylland will change their tactics. Probably see that as maybe a potential weak link. But I'm confident enough. If the manager gives them the nod, then I'd be confident in the manager's choice with those two at the back to say they can complete the job or help Celtic complete the job. But I agree with you totally. They would need to be protected by whatever personnel they brought in. If that was Shaw and Sorrow, just saying, look, won't play too far, in front of them. Stick with them. Talk them through it. Make sure they're safe at all times. It would make sense.
And the thing is as well, if the game's still there after an hour or so, you've got that option coming off the bench. You've got a Turnbull, you've got a Rogic, you've got an Edward, if he's not the one that starts, that if you need that goal, you can turn to them. And once you're comfortable playing that position, then with 20-30 minutes to go, if you're still in it, just go for it.
Yeah, I think that's been a big weakness of the team in the last season, especially that we haven't had an option coming off the bench, and with these couple of signings, you feel like we're bulking out the squad a little bit. Still got a long way to go, obviously, but we're getting there. It remains to be seen. What happens next week with Midtjylland, but certainly we're all a bit more positive than we were. We've got the friendly against West Ham tomorrow. That we will be covering on ACSOM. You won't be, Colin, or not as far as I'm aware, because you have won the Ballon and are going back to the game. How are you feeling about that?
It's like Christmas Eve here. I am absolutely buzzing to get back to Celtic Park. I don't care what the scoreline is tomorrow. Yeah. Even if we go away with a 10-0 defeat tomorrow, I'll have a smile, the Lenversucky Hall Street, and the fact that I'm getting back to Celtic Park. It's been so long. I was extremely jealous of the 9,000 on Tuesday night and even the 2,000 on the Saturday before. So it's great to see that we're kind of on the path now to getting the fans back into the ground. I think is it 24,500 for either the next qualifier or the first league game of the season. So hopefully it won't be too long before we see 50,000-60,000 at Celtic Park, and I'm absolutely buzzing to get back tomorrow. I'm also not too far away from where I'm sitting, so it's almost like getting back to normal. They're teasing us for getting there.
We're on the road again, as they say.
Exactly.
But before we finish out the show, I just wanted to have a wee let folk into a little bit of the experience of being on this show and the opportunities that are afforded to us by being on this show. I was talking to Tony about it. I was talking to the guys in the group chat and to Colin about it. I had the fortune last week of attending my first ever fan press conference with Leela Bada. Got to ask him a question, perhaps expected a little too much from his answer, because I asked him basically to tell me all Dom Mackay and Ange Postecoglou's plans for the club going forward, which obviously he didn't do, but he was very courteous in his answer, but got a lot of information out of him that left me in no doubt about the type of player he is, about the fact that he's definitely an Ange Postecoglou signing, so there was plenty to take from that. But the reason I wanted to talk about it was just to say, this show and this opportunity to do these things, it really was a dream come true. The opportunity to get into these things, and I say this to anybody watching, to anybody listening, if you're able to, take up a hobby like I've done, like everybody else on this podcast has done, all thanks to Paul John for starting it, obviously. If you're able to take up a hobby that gets you opportunities like this, please take the opportunity, because it really is a kind of bucket list moment. If you'd told 12-year-old me that I'd be sitting in a press conference with a brand new Celtic signing, I don't think I'd have believed you. So yeah, I'm just saying to anybody out there, take these opportunities when they come your way, because you will not regret it whenever you get the chance. And the other reason I want to talk about it is because obviously we've got Tony Haggerty here, who has been a professional sports journalist for I don't want to guess how long, Tony. I'll not.
Use your word more carefully.
I'll not offend you by trying to guess how long it is, but
I write things down in newspapers.
Well, Colin was telling us 25 years for Henrik Larsson, and I got a bit personally offended by that, but then he clarified, so we were all good. But Tony, You've got a bit more of a professional experience of being in these press conferences. You must have some stories from those experiences that are good for the after dinner circuit.
I'll tell you my most favourite story, and it's not about a press conference, it's actually about my first ever game. I covered the Daily Record, right? I was a journalism student at Glasgow Uni, Glasgow Colin in Strathclyde, and I'd written to all the papers and asked to cover games. The Daily Record got back to me. Bill Leckie was the sports editor, and he says, "We're sending you to Queen's Park, Forster, Hampden." And I'm like, "Yes, right, fine, great, we'll try you out, magnificent." So I'm as keen as mustard. I've turned up, brilliant. Tony, you go down after the game, you speak to the players, guy scores a win and go with two managers, you write a report. Magic, great, fantastic. So there I am, and I've sat there, right? Notebook, pen, pad, paper, stopwatch. Hear the ref's whistle, click the stopwatch, and I'm just kind of sitting and I look up, and Danny Ferry's running away like that. Queen's Park are 1-up. I've not seen it. And I'm watching a career disappear around the U-bend as quick as anything, right? There's three of us there. There's myself, there's a guy from the Sun, and a guy from PA. So we've all turned to each other in unison. We've went, "What happened there?" Three journalists, and not one of us has seen it, right? Scottish press for you in microcosmic form. So I'm starting to panic. Oh no. So I see the steward, and I shout to the steward, "Did you see that?" He's like, "No." Shout him over, and I kid you not, this is Billy Conley's right. So the guy wanders over, and I says to him, "Listen," I says, "couldn't make it up. I says, three journalists, what we like, none of us saw the goal. Can you talk us through it?" And without a word of a lie, he looks and says, "You the Queen Party take a tenner, put a Princeton, tenner." And I'm like, "Oh no, you know what I mean?" And it's the fault of the guy, you know what I mean? But something like that, she's "Can you tell us slowly again what happened there?" So sure enough, through the same rigmarole, and the guy, "Oh no, this is I say, like, "Thanks very much, that's wonderful." So I looked at the other two and I'm like, "What do you think?" He's like, "I don't know." So I've gone down at the end of the game. Queen's Park won 4-0. I've gone down. I've interviewed Danny Ferry. I said, "Danny, 9 seconds, cannonball kid and all that kind of stuff. Talk us through it." And he's like, "I don't know what happened. I just ran forward and the ball just appeared in front of me and I stuck it in the net." Oh man, right, okay, fine. The manager never saw it either. He was too busy, getting in the trick. So nobody knows what's happened, and I'm thinking, I'm going to have to fudge this here. So, but I know the first question I'm going to ask is, what happened? But thankfully I couldn't drive at that point. My brother and my dad were there. So we've gone home and I'm writing for the Monday, so I write my report on the Sunday. And I've said to him, walked home, I've said to my brother and my dad, "Didn't see the first goal, did she?" I'm rolling about laughing. They're like, "Sacked in the morning." And so, yeah, thankfully the two of them. So what happened was, it was a swirling wind and rain, right? Queens have took centre. They've hit it back. The guy's just launched it. You're talking about sweeper keepers. He's been out like 30 yards, and the centre defenders is kind of in front of him. The ball's bounced and it's floated right off the turf over the two of them. And Danny Ferry's came from nowhere and just thought, and stuck it in the net. But those words are always in my head, and poor wee man, wee steward guy, he's probably not been paid a lot of money, and and I was just like, oh God, of all the stewards that you picked, he's just like, and the guy was getting really excited because he was talking to journalists. It was just like, magic, mate, thanks very much.
Reminds me of that famous clip of Chris Kamara on Soccer Saturday, where they go to him, I think it's Portsmouth and Blackburn are playing. Jeff Stelling says, "There's been a sending off at Ewood Park, Chris, but for who?" And he goes, "I don't know." He hadn't seen it.
And life affords you wonderful privileges doing this job, and I love it, and I love it dearly. I love it with a passion. But when I think you talk about humble beginnings, that's the most humblest of beginnings. Whereas a football journalist, you missed the first ever goal and the first ever match that you covered, and people probably accuse you of missing everything ever since, and and being like that. But you that moment of excitement that you got the other day doing that, Laura, it was only matched by my seeing on the Monday the byline, Queen's Park 4-4
Yeah.
And that's the one that I've got laminated. It's not anything else. It's that one, because that's the one that kick-started everything. That's the one that means the world to me. You know, when people say, "Oh, you've covered this game and you've covered that press conference and you've did that," yeah, I've done a lot of things. Jim says I've seen a lot of things and did a lot of things, but see that one there, Queen's Park 4-4 that's just the one that, you know, has led to everything else, which I have did my career in football journalism, and without that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. So that I've got such a fond affection for Hampden, Queen's Park, Forster, you know, things like that. They just trigger that memory, and I can't stop laughing when I think about that, and how I was nearly crying at the time. and what's the chances of you going to your first ever game and a guy scoring in 9 seconds? You know, it's just like, and I think I started, the first ever line I wrote was turbocharged Danny Ferry. You know,
excellent.
Talk about tabloid fodder, you know what I mean? And refer to him as a cannonball kid in the next paragraph or something. You know,
excellent.
So, yeah.
Great stuff, and yeah, like you say, I got a wee glimpse of that excitement, that kind of that wonderment of being in the press conference. And I say the only thing that shocked me when I eventually got into the call was what was staring back at me was a 19-year-old boy who'd just moved halfway across the world to play football, you know. So everybody's a human being at the end of the day, and you've got to remember that. Colin, before we go, in case you're not familiar with the Friday show, I know you are, I know you watch it every week, but in case you're not, Tony is famous for making us greet, and he nearly did it again today. So on that note, we will leave it. We'll obviously see everybody. Thanks for commenting on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. If you haven't subscribed already, please get subscribed. We'll see you again this weekend for the match coverage against West Ham United. Colin, Tony, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, everybody.